Madam Secretary, thank you for joining us. These clearly are encouraging numbers. Certainly it looks like inflation was not going as fast as people thought it was. From your perspective, if you had an opportunity to take a look at this and see why it may be encouraging, and specifically how much of it might be less demand as opposed to more supply, because I know you've been focused on more supply.
Yeah, good morning. Good to be with you. So, it is good news. It is good news, although I do think we have to be cautious. A big reason for the good news, gas prices are leveling off, and that's certainly helpful to consumers. But as you point out, there are other issues like in housing that we have to still keep our eye on the ball. As we've said all along, there's no silver bullet here. We have to increase supply. Yesterday with the CHIPS Act, that's a huge step forward. We need to increase supply of chips. We need to increase supply of gas, like what the president has been doing with the petroleum reserves. But we cannot, as I said, take our eye off the ball, because we're not out of the woods on this, and we're going to continue to try to alleviate the high prices for consumers.
So I want to come back to the CHIPS Act in just a moment, because you and I have talked about that quite a bit. But just before that, on supply chain, because that's something you spent a lot of time on also. Where are we, do you think, on fixing the supply chain? And specifically, let me give you an example. There was a piece on the Bloomberg actually showing the record profits, above record profits, for container lines, actually. A lot of the shipping companies are making a lot of money. How are we doing on things like shipping costs?
We've made an awful lot of progress, but we're not there yet. So a year ago, 6 months ago, our ports were clogged, they were congested, they weren't moving. We had a shortage of truck drivers. That has been largely alleviated. We went after that problem, and we're feeling good about that. The price gouging that you just identified by the freight companies, we are still working on that. Better than it was, still, more to do. One of the areas you saw coming down with inflation this month is appliances. Appliances prices are coming down. That is a direct link to supply chains, unsticking supply chains. So I think we have made a great deal of progress on unsticking supply chains in many of the areas that I just said. Having said that, we're not there yet. You see it all over the world. You know as well as I do. All over the world, COVID wreaked havoc with our supply chains. And I feel great about what we've done, but still there's more to do.
Madam Secretary, let's go to that CHIPS and Science Act. As I say, you and I have talked about it. You've been very explicit. We need it. We need it fast. Congratulations, it got done. Now let's talk about the fast part. $52 billion in essentially industrial policy. The United States of America hasn't done that much of it. What is the process by which you actually get that money out and working?
Yeah, so as you say, it's a huge day. With the stroke of a pen yesterday, President Biden ensured that we'll be able to secure our national security by making the chips in America that we need for cars, airplanes, military equipment, et cetera. And by the way, we'll create hundreds of thousands of high-paying jobs in the process. So that's huge. We are already at work here at the Commerce Department. It's my department that will administer that money. And we are in the process now of building a team. And we're going to get the money out as fast as we can, which is to say within months, not years, working with the private sector to make sure that this is transparent. We hold these companies accountable. It's not a blank check, but I know we need to move swiftly, and we will do that. The last thing I'll say is this. The fact that we got that bill across the finish line has been a huge signal to industry that they ought to invest in America and not in Asia or Europe. And you're already seeing that. Yesterday, Micron announced $40 billion investment in the United States. A couple of days ago, Global Foundries announced a partnership with Qualcomm expanding in the United States. So I think you're going to see effects immediately, because this is a signal to industry, invest in the U.S.
So, Madam Secretary, let me ask you specifically about that, about the private sector, because the theory of this bill, as I understand it, is there'll be a multiplier effect. It's $52 billion, but there'll be many times that. Do you have an estimate of how big that multiplier effect is in terms of private investment piggybacking on the public?
I'd say at least 4 or 5 times the amount, if not more. Our goal is to maximize it. But as big as $52 billion is, it is a drop in the bucket, a very big drop in the bucket towards what this economy needs. It is an amount that we hope is enough to unlock $200, $300, $400 billion on behalf of private industry. And that's the way that we are going to administer the program.
Madam Secretary, the origins of this bill, as I recall, it was pending for quite some time, were in part at least to make sure we could be competitive with China. Let's talk about China and trade with China for a moment. We have heard from President Biden he's considering modifying those tariffs that were imposed under the Trump administration. I guess my simple question that a lot of people are asking is, why is it taking so long to decide what to do with those tariffs?
Yeah, he is still considering it. It's a big decision. Obviously, the geopolitical situation with China is complicated. Candidly, right now, after Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, it's particularly complicated. So the president is weighing his options. He is very cautious. He wants to make sure that we don't do anything which would hurt American labor and American workers. But I expect that, I know he's looking at it. We've talked about it again recently, and I expect he'll be making a decision before too long.
So behind the scenes, are there discussions going on, and is the Commerce Department involved in with your Chinese counterparts, not only on those tariffs, but more broadly on trade? Are there some back channel discussions going on that could lead to something down the road?
I would say yes, but they are limited at this point in time, mainly because China has not been that interested to engage. So we are trying. We certainly think that there is a benefit to having communication, back channel communication, but it takes two. It takes two. And so hopefully China will be increasingly interested in having those discussions with us.
You mentioned, actually, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. To what extent has that slowed down or derailed those back channel discussions?
Certainly has made it a little more challenging. As I said, at this moment, it's harder, but I am hopeful that we will get beyond that and get back to a place where we can have more of those discussions.
Madam Secretary, this is obviously an attempt for the United States to have a lot more investment, be much more efficient, productive in producing chips. China has its own challenges. It has its own programs in trying to develop its own chips. I know the United States has really curtailed shipment of chip-making equipment to China. Could you give us a sense of where you are, the Commerce Department is on that process?
Yes, we spend time on this every single day. We have to make sure that no leading edge, cutting edge technology in semiconductors, or for that matter, any technology, goes from the United States to China, period. And that's a complicated analysis, right? So we want to make sure that to the extent that our software, our tooling, our chips, our leading edge, most sophisticated, our intellectual property, that can't get into the hands of China. And so we're using our export controls effectively to do that. Having said that, we have to work with our allies, right? What good is it if we block the sale of our technology, but the Chinese can buy that from Germany or the Netherlands or Japan? So the way I think about this is be as strict as possible, have very, very high walls around our most sophisticated technology, but do it with our allies so it's effective and not denying U.S. companies revenue. And that's an ongoing process, but we are doing it very effectively, I would say. I mean, you look at Huawei. The export controls that the Commerce Department imposed on Huawei has significantly hurt Huawei's ability to compete and get ahead of U.S. tech companies. So we have to be vigilant is the bottom line.